Question 1. Process analysis reveals that Harmony Gold procurement officer is responsible for evaluating bids from various suppliers for a critical mining equipment contract. The officer discovers that one of the leading bidders is a company owned and operated by their sibling. The officer has no direct financial stake in the sibling's company, but is aware of the close personal relationship. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Harmony Gold procurement officer in this situation? Option A. Proceed with the evaluation as normal, assuming their professional judgment is objective and that the personal relationship will not influence their decision. Option B. Discreetly inform the siblings' company about the bids received and suggest ways they can improve their proposal to win the contract. Option C. Resign from their position to avoid any potential conflict of interest without informing anyone of the specific reason. Option D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct manager and the company's compliance department, and recuse themselves from any further involvement in the evaluation and selection process for this specific contract. Correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct manager and the company's compliance department, and recuse themselves from any further involvement in the evaluation and selection process for this specific contract. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Harmony Gold due to the potential conflict between a personal relationship and the company's obligation to maintain fair and transparent dealings with its suppliers. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that decisions regarding supplier selection and contract terms are based solely on merit, quality, and price, and are not influenced by personal connections. This requires a high degree of integrity and adherence to Harmony Gold's internal policies and relevant industry regulations concerning conflicts of interest and procurement practices. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to the appropriate authority within Harmony Gold, such as the compliance department or a designated manager. This allows the company to implement appropriate safeguards, such as recusal from decision-making processes involving the supplier or enhanced oversight. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with regulatory expectations for corporate governance and ethical conduct, which mandate the identification and management of potential conflicts of interest to prevent undue influence and ensure fair competition. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the supplier selection process without disclosing the relationship. This failure to disclose constitutes a breach of ethical duty and potentially violates Harmony Gold's internal policies on conflicts of interest. It creates an appearance of impropriety, even if no actual favoritism occurs, and undermines trust within the organization and with other suppliers. Furthermore, it could expose Harmony Gold to regulatory scrutiny if it is later discovered that a supplier was chosen based on personal connections rather than objective criteria, potentially leading to accusations of unfair procurement practices. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to subtly influence the decision-making process in favor of the connected supplier, even if the relationship is not formally disclosed. This is a direct violation of ethical principles and company policy, as it prioritizes personal gain or obligation over the company's best interests and the principles of fair dealing. Such actions can lead to significant reputational damage for Harmony Gold and severe consequences for the employee involved. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive assessment of any personal relationships that could be perceived as influencing business decisions. If such a relationship exists, the employee must err on the side of caution and disclose it promptly and fully to the relevant internal stakeholders. This allows for a structured and transparent management of the potential conflict, ensuring that all procurement decisions remain objective and compliant with Harmony Gold standards and any applicable regulatory requirements. Question 2. Upon reviewing a proposed transaction for Harmony Gold, an employee identifies several unusual patterns in the documentation that suggest a potential misstatement of financial performance. The employee's immediate supervisor urges them to approve the transaction quickly to meet quarterly targets, stating that such minor discrepancies are common and should not delay business. What is the most appropriate course of action for the employee? Option A. Object to the transaction and request a thorough investigation into the unusual patterns, documenting all concerns and seeking guidance from the compliance department. Option B. Ignore the unusual patterns and approve the transaction, focusing solely on meeting the immediate target set by the supervisor. Option C. Inform the supervisor that the transaction will be approved, but discreetly delay its finalization while observing if any issues arise later. Option D. Proceed with the transaction as instructed by the supervisor to ensure quarterly targets are met, assuming the supervisor has a better understanding of acceptable practices. The correct answer is A. Object to the transaction and request a thorough investigation into the unusual patterns, documenting all concerns and seeking guidance from the compliance department. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance the company's immediate financial needs with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. Pressure to meet targets can lead to a temptation to overlook or downplay potential compliance issues, creating a conflict between short-term gains and sustainable, lawful business practices. Careful judgment is required to identify and address these conflicts proactively, ensuring that Harmony Gold operates within the bounds of its regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the information presented, followed by a clear and documented communication of potential risks and the need for further investigation. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, which mandate transparency, due diligence, and adherence to established procedures. Specifically, it reflects the duty of care expected of employees to act in the best interests of the company, which includes safeguarding its reputation and avoiding legal or regulatory penalties. This approach prioritizes a systematic and evidence-based decision-making process, ensuring that any actions taken are informed and defensible. An incorrect approach that involves immediately proceeding with the transaction without further scrutiny fails to uphold the duty of due diligence. This could lead to breaches of regulatory requirements related to financial reporting, anti-money laundering, or market integrity, depending on the specific nature of the transaction and the applicable regulations governing Harmony Gold. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the concerns without adequate investigation, demonstrates a disregard for potential risks and a failure to exercise professional skepticism. This can result in significant reputational damage and financial penalties for Harmony Gold, as well as personal liability for the individual involved. Ignoring the red flags, even if they seem minor at first glance, can be interpreted as a willful blindness to potential misconduct, which is a serious ethical and regulatory failing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue and its potential implications. This involves gathering all relevant facts, assessing them against the company's internal policies and the applicable regulatory framework, and consulting with relevant stakeholders or subject matter experts if necessary. The process should emphasize documentation at each stage, ensuring a clear audit trail of the decision-making process. When faced with uncertainty or potential risks, the default professional response should be to seek clarification and further information rather than to proceed hastily or to ignore the concerns. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that Harmony Gold is in the process of selecting a new supplier for essential mining equipment. An employee involved in the evaluation committee discovers that one of the leading shortlisted suppliers is owned by their sibling. This employee has a close personal relationship with their sibling and is aware of the sibling's business challenges. What is the most appropriate course of action for this employee to take? Option A. Continue with the evaluation process as normal, ensuring they remain objective and do not show any favoritism, as their professional integrity will prevent any undue influence. Option B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct manager and the compliance department, and request to be recused from any further evaluation or decision-making related to this supplier. Option C. Inform their sibling about the evaluation process and advise them on how to best present their company's proposal to increase their chances of winning the contract. Option D. Discreetly advocate for the sibling's company during internal discussions, highlighting their strengths without explicitly mentioning the personal relationship to help them secure the contract. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct manager and the compliance department, and request to be recused from any further evaluation or decision-making related to this supplier. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Harmony Gold due to the inherent conflict between a personal relationship and the company's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for perceived or actual conflicts of interest, which could undermine the integrity of Harmony Gold's operations and its reputation. Adherence to the company's code of conduct and relevant mining sector regulations is paramount. The correct approach involves transparently disclosing the personal relationship to the appropriate authority within Harmony Gold, such as HR or a compliance officer, and recusing oneself from any decision-making processes that could directly or indirectly benefit the family member's company. This upholds the principle of acting in the best interest of Harmony Gold, maintaining objectivity, and preventing any appearance of impropriety. It aligns with the ethical duty to avoid conflicts of interest, a cornerstone of corporate governance and regulatory compliance in the mining industry, ensuring fair dealings and preventing favoritism. An incorrect approach of proceeding without disclosure risks violating Harmony Gold's internal policies on conflicts of interest and potentially breaching regulatory requirements related to fair procurement or contract awards. This could lead to accusations of favoritism, unfair competition, and a lack of due diligence, damaging Harmony Gold's reputation and potentially incurring penalties. Another incorrect approach of attempting to subtly influence the decision-making process in favor of the family member's company, even without direct financial gain, is unethical and a breach of trust. This undermines the integrity of Harmony Gold's procurement processes and demonstrates a failure to prioritize the company's interests over personal relationships. It also contravenes the fundamental ethical obligation to act with honesty and integrity. Finally, an incorrect approach of ignoring the relationship and continuing with normal duties without any consideration for the potential conflict is negligent. It demonstrates a lack of awareness or disregard for ethical responsibilities and regulatory expectations, leaving Harmony Gold exposed to significant reputational and legal risks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, ethical conduct, and adherence to company policy and regulations. This involves proactively identifying potential conflicts of interest, understanding the company's specific policies and relevant industry regulations, seeking guidance from appropriate internal departments, e.g., compliance, HR, and acting with integrity to safeguard the company's interests. Question 4. The control framework reveals that a senior manager at Harmony Gold has a close personal relationship with a supplier who is bidding for a significant contract. The senior manager has been involved in the preliminary stages of evaluating bids, including reviewing the supplier's proposal. The manager has not disclosed this relationship to their supervisor or the procurement department. What is the most appropriate course of action for an employee who becomes aware of this situation? Option A. Immediately report the situation, including all known details, to Harmony Gold's compliance department or designated ethics officer. Option B. Discuss the situation with the senior manager directly to understand their perspective before deciding on further action. Option C. Continue to monitor the situation and only report it if there is clear evidence of impropriety or unfair treatment of other bidders. Option D. Discreetly advise the senior manager to recuse themselves from the evaluation process and ensure the supplier's bid is treated fairly. Correct answer is D. Discreetly advise the senior manager to recuse themselves from the evaluation process and ensure the supplier's bid is treated fairly. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual at Harmony Gold to navigate a situation where a potential conflict of interest could arise, impacting the integrity of financial reporting and compliance. The pressure to meet targets, coupled with the personal relationship, creates a complex ethical and regulatory landscape. Careful judgment is required to uphold Harmony Gold's commitment to transparency and regulatory adherence. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the situation to the appropriate compliance or legal department. This upholds professional integrity by proactively addressing a potential breach of Harmony Gold's code of conduct and relevant financial regulations. By reporting the situation, the individual ensures that an independent review can take place, mitigating any actual or perceived conflict of interest and safeguarding the accuracy of financial disclosures. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, which mandate reporting of potential conflicts. An incorrect approach would be to overlook the situation due to the personal relationship or the perceived minor nature of the transaction. This failure to report a potential conflict of interest directly contravenes ethical obligations and regulatory requirements that mandate disclosure and management of such situations. It risks compromising the independence of financial reporting and could lead to regulatory sanctions or reputational damage for Harmony Gold. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to resolve the issue independently without involving the designated compliance channels. This bypasses established internal controls and oversight mechanisms designed to ensure fair and objective decision-making. It also fails to provide the necessary documentation and transparency required by regulatory bodies, potentially exposing Harmony Gold to scrutiny and penalties. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of Harmony Gold's internal policies on conflicts of interest and ethical conduct. When faced with a potential conflict, the immediate step is to consult these policies and then escalate the matter to the designated authority, such as the compliance officer or legal counsel. This ensures that the situation is handled in accordance with established procedures and regulatory expectations, prioritizing ethical conduct and the company's reputation. Question 5. Examination of the data shows that an employee at Harmony Gold has received a tip from a trusted friend about a significant upcoming development within a publicly traded company that is a key supplier to Harmony Gold. This development, if it materializes, is likely to substantially increase the supplier's share price. The employee is considering investing in this supplier's shares using personal funds. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the Harmony Gold employee? Option A. Immediately disclose the information and the potential investment intention to Harmony Gold's compliance department for guidance. Option B. Invest in the supplier's shares but refrain from discussing the investment or the information with anyone at Harmony Gold. Option C. Immediately invest in the supplier's shares as the information is from a trusted source and not directly obtained from Harmony Gold. Option D. Decline to invest and forget about the information, as it is not directly related to Harmony Gold's internal operations. The correct answer is C. Immediately invest in the supplier's shares as the information is from a trusted source and not directly obtained from Harmony Gold. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Harmony Gold due to the potential conflict between personal financial interests and the company's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining objectivity and avoiding insider trading or the appearance of impropriety. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken aligns with Harmony Gold's internal policies and the relevant regulatory framework governing financial markets. The correct approach involves immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the appropriate internal authority at Harmony Gold, such as the compliance department or a designated manager. This proactive disclosure allows the company to assess the situation, provide guidance, and ensure that no breaches of policy or regulation occur. This aligns with the ethical duty of loyalty to the employer and the regulatory requirement to prevent market abuse. Specifically, it upholds principles of transparency and good corporate governance, which are paramount in the financial services industry and are often codified in company codes of conduct and securities regulations designed to protect market integrity. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the investment without informing Harmony Gold. This failure to disclose a potential conflict of interest is a serious ethical lapse and a potential regulatory violation. It could be construed as an attempt to gain an unfair advantage or to engage in insider trading, depending on the nature of the information and the investment. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on personal judgment without seeking clarification or approval from Harmony Gold. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the company's internal controls and the importance of adhering to established compliance procedures, which are designed to mitigate risks for both the individual and the organization. A third incorrect approach would be to discuss the potential investment with colleagues at Harmony Gold who are not authorized to receive such information, as this could inadvertently lead to the dissemination of non-public information and create further compliance risks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to company policy, and regulatory compliance. This involves a clear understanding of one's ethical obligations, the company's code of conduct, and relevant laws. When faced with a potential conflict of interest or a situation that could be perceived as such, the immediate step should be to consult internal policies and seek guidance from the compliance department or a supervisor. This proactive approach ensures that decisions are made with full awareness of the implications and in accordance with established standards. Question 6. Assessment of how an employee at Harmony Gold, who is responsible for evaluating potential new mining sites, should proceed when they discover that a close family member is a significant shareholder in a private company that owns land adjacent to a prime exploration target identified by Harmony Gold. Option A. Discuss the situation informally with a trusted colleague in the exploration team to gauge their opinion before making any decisions. Option B. Immediately disclose the potential conflict of interest to the Harmony Gold Compliance Department and await their guidance on how to proceed with the evaluation. Option C. Continue with the evaluation of the exploration target as planned, assuming their professional judgment will not be compromised. Option D. Research the financial implications for their family member and decide if the potential gain warrants disclosing the situation. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the potential conflict of interest to the Harmony Gold Compliance Department and await their guidance on how to proceed with the evaluation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Harmony Gold, requiring them to navigate a situation where a potential conflict of interest may arise. The challenge lies in identifying and appropriately managing such conflicts to uphold ethical standards and regulatory compliance, ensuring that personal interests do not improperly influence professional judgment or actions. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between a genuine conflict and a perceived one, and to apply the correct internal policies and external regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the designated compliance officer or manager at Harmony Gold. This aligns with the principles of transparency and good corporate governance, which are often mandated by regulatory frameworks governing financial services and mining operations. By disclosing, the employee allows Harmony Gold to assess the situation, implement appropriate mitigation strategies, such as recusal from specific decisions or oversight, and ensure that all actions taken are in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders, thereby adhering to ethical duties and potential regulatory requirements for conflict management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to ignore the situation and proceed without disclosure. This failure constitutes a breach of ethical duty and potentially violates internal Harmony Gold policies on conflicts of interest. It also risks contravening regulatory expectations for robust internal controls and transparency, which could lead to reputational damage and regulatory sanctions for Harmony Gold. Another incorrect approach is to seek advice only from colleagues who are not in a designated compliance or management role. While collegial advice can be helpful, it does not substitute for formal disclosure and assessment by those responsible for ensuring regulatory adherence and ethical conduct within Harmony Gold. Relying on informal advice could lead to a misinterpretation of policies or regulations, leaving the employee and the company exposed. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to manage the conflict independently without any oversight. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the importance of a structured conflict resolution process. It bypasses established Harmony Gold procedures designed to ensure impartiality and compliance, and it fails to provide the necessary assurance to stakeholders that decisions are made without undue influence. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing potential conflicts of interest should adopt a systematic approach. First, identify any situation where personal interests could potentially influence professional judgment or actions. Second, consult Harmony Gold's internal policies and procedures regarding conflicts of interest. Third, err on the side of caution by disclosing the potential conflict to the appropriate authority, e.g., compliance officer, manager, as soon as it is identified. Fourth, cooperate fully with any investigation or mitigation process initiated by the company. This structured approach ensures that ethical obligations and regulatory requirements are met, safeguarding both the individual and the organization. Question 7. Which approach would be most professionally sound for a Harmony Gold employee who discovers a potential investment opportunity in a junior mining exploration company that is a known supplier to Harmony Gold, and the employee's role involves evaluating supplier performance? Option A. Make the investment and only consider disclosing it if it becomes a significant financial gain. Option B. Discuss the investment with a peer in a different department to gauge their opinion before making a decision. Option C. Proceed with the investment without informing Harmony Gold, assuming it is a personal matter and unlikely to affect their professional judgment. Option D. Disclose the potential investment to Harmony Gold's compliance department and seek guidance on whether to proceed, following their instructions. Correct answer is D. Disclose the potential investment to Harmony Gold's compliance department and seek guidance on whether to proceed, following their instructions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Harmony Gold due to the potential conflict between personal financial interests and the company's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The core difficulty lies in navigating situations where personal gain could inadvertently compromise professional integrity or lead to noncompliance with Harmony Gold's internal policies and relevant mining sector regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions align with the company's commitment to responsible operations and legal adherence. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to Harmony Gold's established conflict of interest policy. This means proactively disclosing the potential conflict to the appropriate internal authority, such as the compliance department or line manager, and seeking guidance on how to proceed. This approach is correct because it upholds the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance. Specifically, it aligns with the spirit and likely letter of any robust conflict of interest policy, which aims to prevent situations where an employee's personal interest could influence their professional judgment or actions in a way that is detrimental to the company or its stakeholders. Such policies are often underpinned by broader regulatory expectations for listed companies to maintain high standards of integrity and transparency. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the investment without disclosure, assuming it would not impact their role. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the company's established control mechanisms designed to manage conflicts of interest. Ethically, it represents a failure of duty to the employer. From a regulatory perspective, depending on the nature of the investment and the employee's role, this could potentially violate disclosure requirements or lead to insider trading concerns if the employee possesses material non-public information. Another incorrect approach would be to seek advice from a colleague who is not in a position of authority or responsibility for compliance. While well-intentioned, this bypasses the formal channels for addressing conflicts of interest and may not provide accurate or compliant advice. It fails to engage the necessary oversight and could lead to a misinterpretation of policy or regulation. A third incorrect approach would be to make the investment and then hope it is not discovered. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and a disregard for professional responsibility. It actively conceals a potential conflict, which is a serious ethical breach and likely a violation of company policy and potentially regulatory requirements related to conduct and disclosure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Harmony Gold's conflict of interest policy and any relevant industry codes of conduct. When faced with a potential conflict, the first step is always to identify it. The next step is to consult the relevant policy and then to proactively disclose the situation to the designated authority within the company. This ensures that any potential issues are managed transparently and in accordance with established procedures and regulatory expectations. Question 8. Implementation of new operational procedures at Harmony Gold's mine site is underway, aimed at increasing gold extraction efficiency. A junior geologist, reviewing the proposed steps, identifies a potential ambiguity in the waste rock disposal protocol that might, under certain interpretations, contravene local environmental guidelines regarding soil contamination. The geologist is under pressure to ensure the new procedures are adopted swiftly to meet quarterly production targets. What is the most professionally responsible course of action for the junior geologist? Option A. Halt the implementation of the new procedures immediately and inform senior management that the entire plan is non-compliant. Option B. Implement the new procedures and monitor for any immediate environmental impacts, reporting them only if they become substantial. Option C. Seek clarification on the ambiguous waste rock disposal protocol from Harmony Gold's internal compliance department or legal counsel before proceeding with implementation. Option D. Proceed with the implementation of the new procedures as planned, assuming the ambiguity is minor and unlikely to cause a significant issue, to avoid delaying the production targets. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the implementation of the new procedures as planned, assuming the ambiguity is minor and unlikely to cause a significant issue, to avoid delaying the production targets. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Harmony Gold employee due to the inherent conflict between achieving performance targets and adhering to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet production quotas can incentivize shortcuts or overlooking minor infractions, which, if not managed properly, can escalate into significant compliance breaches. Careful judgment is required to balance operational efficiency with the imperative of upholding Harmony Gold's integrity and legal obligations. The correct approach involves proactively identifying potential compliance risks associated with the new operational procedures and seeking clarification from the relevant internal compliance department or legal counsel before implementation. This demonstrates a commitment to due diligence, risk mitigation, and adherence to Harmony Gold's internal policies and external regulatory framework. It ensures that any new procedures are vetted for compliance, thereby preventing potential violations and safeguarding the company from legal repercussions and reputational damage. This aligns with the principles of responsible corporate conduct and the duty of care expected of employees. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the implementation without seeking clarification, assuming the procedures are compliant. This failure to exercise due diligence and proactively address potential compliance issues constitutes a regulatory and ethical lapse. It risks violating Harmony Gold's internal codes of conduct and potentially external laws or regulations governing mining operations, even if unintentionally. Another incorrect approach is to implement the procedures and then report potential issues only if they become significant problems. This reactive stance is insufficient. Regulatory compliance requires a proactive and preventative mindset. Waiting for issues to escalate can lead to more severe consequences, including penalties, fines, and damage to Harmony Gold's reputation. It also suggests a lack of commitment to a culture of compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and adherence to regulatory requirements and company policy. This involves a thorough review of new procedures, identifying potential areas of concern, consulting with designated compliance or legal experts within Harmony Gold, and ensuring all implemented practices are demonstrably compliant before full rollout. If ambiguity exists, seeking clarification is paramount, rather than making assumptions. Question 9. The audit findings indicate that a junior analyst at Harmony Gold may have inadvertently shared confidential client portfolio details with an unauthorized third party via email. The analyst claims it was an honest mistake due to a misaddressed email. As the designated compliance officer, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Advise the analyst to delete the email and remind them of the company's data privacy policy. Option B. Report the incident to senior management and initiate a formal, confidential investigation into the alleged data breach. Option C. Publicly announce a potential data breach to inform clients and stakeholders of the situation. Option D. Immediately suspend the analyst pending a full investigation and secure all relevant electronic communications. Correct answer is D. Immediately suspend the analyst pending a full investigation and secure all relevant electronic communications. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential breach of Harmony Gold's internal policies and relevant regulatory requirements concerning the handling of sensitive client information. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate and decisive action to mitigate potential harm to clients, maintain regulatory compliance, and uphold the company's reputation. The designated compliance officer must balance the urgency of the situation with the need for a thorough and fair investigation. The correct approach involves a prompt, confidential, and thorough investigation into the alleged data breach. This includes securing the affected systems, assessing the scope and nature of the breach, identifying the root cause, and notifying affected parties and regulatory bodies, as mandated by law and company policy. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant as it prioritizes client protection, adheres to data privacy regulations, such as those governing financial institutions and data handling, and demonstrates a commitment to transparency and accountability. It aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and risk management. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the audit findings. This failure to act would constitute a serious regulatory and ethical lapse, potentially leading to significant fines, legal repercussions, and severe reputational damage for Harmony Gold. It would also betray the trust placed in the company by its clients. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately terminate the employee without a proper investigation. This is procedurally unfair, potentially discriminatory, and could expose Harmony Gold to legal challenges. It also bypasses the opportunity to understand the full context of the breach, which might involve systemic issues rather than solely individual misconduct. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to disclose the findings publicly before a thorough investigation and proper notification procedures are completed. This premature disclosure could cause undue panic, prejudice the investigation, and violate client confidentiality and data protection laws. Professionals in such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting the reported issue. 2. Immediately initiating a confidential internal investigation, involving relevant departments like IT security and legal/compliance. 3. Assessing the immediate risks and implementing containment measures. 4. Consulting internal policies and applicable regulations to determine reporting obligations and procedural requirements. 5. Communicating with affected parties and regulatory bodies in a timely and appropriate manner based on the investigation's findings and legal advice. 6. Implementing corrective actions and preventative measures to avoid recurrence. Question 10. During the evaluation of a new client relationship at Harmony Gold, an advisor learns that the client, a retiree with a modest but stable income, is highly enthusiastic about a newly launched, high-volatility cryptocurrency fund. The client explicitly states they want to invest a significant portion of their retirement savings into this fund, believing it will provide rapid wealth accumulation. The advisor has concerns about the fund's speculative nature and its suitability for a retiree's risk profile. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Harmony Gold advisor in this situation? Option A. Recommend the cryptocurrency fund, but downplay its inherent risks and emphasize only the potential for high returns to satisfy the client's immediate enthusiasm. Option B. Explain to the client that their understanding of investment risk is flawed and proceed with investing in a conservative, low-yield bond fund that the advisor deems more appropriate, regardless of the client's stated preference. Option C. Immediately invest the client's funds into the cryptocurrency fund as requested, to demonstrate responsiveness to client demands and build immediate rapport. Option D. Advise the client that while the fund is exciting, it does not align with their stated objective of capital preservation and stable income, and propose a diversified portfolio that includes a smaller, speculative allocation if the client insists, after a thorough risk disclosure. The correct answer is D. Advise the client that while the fund is exciting, it does not align with their stated objective of capital preservation and stable income, and propose a diversified portfolio that includes a smaller, speculative allocation if the client insists, after a thorough risk disclosure. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate desire for a specific investment outcome and the advisor's fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interest, which may involve a more conservative or diversified approach. The advisor must navigate this tension while adhering strictly to the regulatory framework governing financial advice in the relevant jurisdiction. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for misinterpretation of client intent, the risk of recommending unsuitable products, and the imperative to maintain client trust through transparent and ethical conduct. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the client's overall financial situation, risk tolerance, and long-term objectives, followed by a recommendation that aligns with these factors, even if it deviates from the client's initial, potentially ill-informed request. This aligns with the core principles of client-centric advice, emphasizing suitability and best interest. Specifically, regulatory frameworks often mandate that financial advisors conduct a comprehensive client assessment and ensure that any recommended product or strategy is appropriate for the client's circumstances. This includes disclosing all relevant risks and fees. An incorrect approach that prioritizes the client's stated preference without adequate due diligence fails to uphold the advisor's duty of care and suitability obligations. Recommending a high-risk, speculative product solely because the client expressed interest, without assessing their capacity to absorb potential losses, is a direct contravention of regulatory requirements designed to protect investors. Another incorrect approach, which involves pressuring the client to accept a recommendation that the advisor believes is not in their best interest, constitutes a breach of ethical conduct and potentially regulatory rules against undue influence or misrepresentation. Finally, an approach that involves providing incomplete or misleading information about investment options, even if intended to steer the client towards a perceived safer option, erodes trust and violates transparency mandates. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive client discovery process. This involves active listening, probing questions to uncover underlying needs and concerns, and a thorough review of financial documentation. Following this, the advisor must analyze the gathered information against regulatory suitability standards and their firm's internal policies. Recommendations should then be presented clearly, explaining the rationale, associated risks, and potential benefits, allowing the client to make an informed decision. If the client's request conflicts with the advisor's professional judgment based on regulatory and ethical considerations, the advisor must explain this conflict and guide the client towards a suitable alternative, rather than simply acquiescing to an unsuitable request. Question 11. Operational review demonstrates that certain inventory valuation adjustments at Harmony Gold's processing facilities have not been consistently applied in accordance with the established accounting standards and relevant mining sector regulations. These adjustments, while seemingly minor in isolation, have created a cumulative effect that may misrepresent the true value of inventory on the company's balance sheet. What is the most appropriate course of action for the finance team at Harmony Gold to address this situation? Option A. Proceed with the current financial reporting, assuming the cumulative impact of the adjustments is immaterial and will not attract regulatory attention. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive investigation into the inventory valuation adjustments, documenting all findings, and ensuring full compliance with the applicable regulatory framework before finalizing financial reports. Option C. Make ad hoc, undocumented adjustments to the inventory figures to align them with the expected reporting outcomes, thereby mitigating potential negative impacts. Option D. Focus on improving the operational efficiency of the inventory management system without immediately addressing the specific regulatory compliance of past valuation adjustments. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive investigation into the inventory valuation adjustments, documenting all findings, and ensuring full compliance with the applicable regulatory framework before finalizing financial reports. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Harmony Gold employees due to the inherent conflict between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet production targets can create an environment where shortcuts or misinterpretations of regulations might seem appealing. However, maintaining the integrity of financial reporting and adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing Harmony Gold's operations is paramount. This requires a deep understanding of the applicable laws and guidelines, and the ability to apply them rigorously even when faced with operational pressures. Careful judgment is required to identify potential breaches and to respond appropriately, ensuring that the company's financial statements are accurate and comply with all legal and ethical standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented investigation into the discrepancies identified during the operational review. This means gathering all relevant documentation, interviewing key personnel involved in the transaction, and comparing the actual practices against the specific regulatory framework applicable to Harmony Gold. The investigation must be objective and impartial, aiming to determine the root cause of the discrepancies and whether they constitute a breach of regulations. If a breach is identified, the appropriate reporting and remediation steps, as mandated by the regulatory framework, must be followed. This approach upholds the principles of transparency, accountability, and compliance, which are fundamental to sound financial management and corporate governance within the specified jurisdiction. Incorrect approach is analysis. Ignoring the discrepancies and proceeding with the current reporting practices is professionally unacceptable because it directly violates the principle of accurate financial reporting. This failure to address identified issues can lead to material misstatements in financial statements, which is a serious regulatory offense. It demonstrates a disregard for compliance obligations and can expose Harmony Gold to significant penalties, reputational damage, and legal action. Attempting to smooth over the discrepancies by making minor, undocumented adjustments to the financial records is also a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This constitutes an attempt to mislead stakeholders and regulators about the true financial position of the company. Such actions are often considered fraudulent and can result in severe consequences for individuals involved and the company itself. It undermines the integrity of the financial reporting process and erodes trust. Focusing solely on the operational impact without investigating the regulatory implications is insufficient. While understanding operational pressures is important, it does not absolve individuals of their responsibility to ensure regulatory compliance. The operational review has highlighted potential regulatory breaches, and a failure to investigate these from a compliance perspective means that potential violations are left unaddressed, leaving Harmony Gold exposed to regulatory scrutiny and sanctions. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a structured problem-solving approach. First, they must acknowledge the findings of the operational review and understand the potential implications for regulatory compliance. Second, they should initiate a formal, documented investigation to ascertain the facts and determine the extent of any regulatory noncompliance. This investigation should be conducted with objectivity and a commitment to uncovering the truth. Third, based on the findings, they must implement the necessary corrective actions and reporting procedures as dictated by the relevant regulatory framework. This includes escalating issues to appropriate internal stakeholders and, if necessary, external regulatory bodies. Finally, professionals should continuously seek to understand and adhere to the evolving regulatory landscape to prevent future occurrences. Question 12. Performance analysis shows that a candidate for a position at Harmony Gold has provided information during the assessment process that appears to be inconsistent with publicly available professional profiles. The hiring manager is eager to proceed with the candidate and suggests reaching out to the candidate's current employer for clarification without explicit candidate consent, believing this will expedite the decision-making process. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for Harmony Gold to take in this situation, strictly adhering to the regulatory framework governing the Harmony Gold hiring assessment test? Option A. Inform the candidate that their information is inconsistent and withdraw their application immediately without further investigation. Option B. Obtain explicit written consent from the candidate before contacting their current employer to verify the information. Option C. Disregard the discrepancy and proceed with the candidate based on the information provided during the assessment to avoid potential delays. Option D. Proceed with contacting the candidate's current employer without consent, as it is a standard hiring practice to verify employment details. The correct answer is B. Obtain explicit written consent from the candidate before contacting their current employer to verify the information. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual at Harmony Gold to interpret and apply regulatory requirements in a situation where there might be ambiguity or conflicting pressures. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that all actions taken by Harmony Gold's employees strictly adhere to the specified regulatory framework, which in this context is assumed to be the Harmony Gold hiring assessment tests governing regulations. This demands a nuanced understanding of compliance, ethical conduct, and the potential consequences of deviation. Careful judgment is required to identify the most appropriate course of action that upholds both the letter and the spirit of the law and internal guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Harmony Gold hiring assessment tests, specific regulatory framework, and internal policies to determine the precise requirements for handling candidate data and communications. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes compliance and ethical data handling, which are paramount in any hiring process. By consulting the definitive source of regulations and guidelines, the individual ensures that Harmony Gold's actions are defensible, transparent, and aligned with legal and ethical standards. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of regulatory breaches, reputational damage, and potential legal repercussions. An incorrect approach that involves making assumptions or relying on informal advice from colleagues would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the established regulatory framework. Such an approach risks misinterpreting or overlooking critical compliance obligations, leading to potential violations of data privacy laws, hiring regulations, or internal harmony goal policies. Another incorrect approach, such as prioritizing expediency over strict adherence to the regulatory framework, is also professionally flawed. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to compliance and ethical conduct, potentially exposing Harmony Gold to significant risks. The underlying failure is a prioritization of speed or convenience over the fundamental requirement to operate within legal and ethical boundaries. The professional reasoning process for similar situation should involve a structured approach. First, identify the specific regulatory or ethical question at hand. Second, locate and meticulously review the relevant regulations, laws, and internal guidelines applicable to Harmony Gold and the specific context. Third, if ambiguity exists, seek clarification from the appropriate internal compliance or legal department. Fourth, document the decision-making process and the rationale based on the regulatory framework. Finally, implement the chosen course of action and monitor for ongoing compliance. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the highest professional and regulatory standards. Question 13. The audit findings indicate a potential weakness in Harmony Gold's revenue recognition process, specifically concerning the timing of recognition for long-term service contracts. Management is concerned about the immediate impact on quarterly financial reporting if adjustments are required. What is the most appropriate course of action for Harmony Gold's management team? Option A. Implement a temporary adjustment to the current quarter's revenue based on a quick estimate, without a formal remediation plan for the underlying control weakness. Option B. Immediately implement a revised revenue recognition policy for all new contracts and defer addressing the historical impact until the year-end audit. Option C. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the identified weakness. Develop a detailed remediation plan with specific timelines and responsible parties, and communicate this plan to the audit committee for oversight. Option D. Acknowledge the finding, but prioritize meeting the current quarter's financial reporting deadlines, assuming the auditors will provide guidance during the year-end audit. Correct answer is B. Immediately implement a revised revenue recognition policy for all new contracts and defer addressing the historical impact until the year-end audit. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between internal audit findings and the immediate operational pressures faced by Harmony Gold's management. The audit has identified a control deficiency that, if not addressed, could lead to misstatements or non-compliance. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough remediation with the demands of ongoing production and financial reporting deadlines. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the response is both compliant with regulatory expectations and practically implementable. The correct approach involves a structured and documented process of assessing the audit findings, developing a remediation plan with clear timelines and assigned responsibilities, and then actively monitoring the implementation of that plan. This demonstrates a commitment to good corporate governance and internal control, which is a fundamental expectation under relevant regulatory frameworks governing listed companies. Specifically, it aligns with principles of robust internal control systems and timely disclosure of material issues. An incorrect approach of dismissing the findings due to time constraints would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It signals a disregard for internal control mechanisms and a potential willingness to overlook risks, which could lead to material misstatements in financial reporting or breaches of regulatory requirements. This failure undermines the integrity of the company's financial reporting and governance processes. Another incorrect approach of implementing a superficial fix without proper root cause analysis or validation would also be professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to address the underlying control weakness, making it likely that the issue will recur. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to meet the spirit of the audit recommendation, potentially leading to continued noncompliance or operational inefficiencies. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the full scope and implications of the audit finding. 2. Consulting with relevant internal stakeholders, e.g., internal audit, finance, operations, to assess the feasibility and impact of remediation. 3. Developing a clear, actionable remediation plan with measurable outcomes and realistic timelines. 4. Obtaining management buy-in and assigning clear accountability for the remediation efforts. 5. Establishing a process for ongoing monitoring and verification of the remediation's effectiveness. 6. Communicating progress and any challenges encountered to relevant oversight bodies, e.g., Audit Committee. Question 14. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a key investor in Harmony Gold has requested access to preliminary, non-public financial projections for a specific project to inform their personal investment decisions outside of Harmony Gold. The investor has emphasized the urgency of this request. Option A. Inform the investor that Harmony Gold's policy strictly prohibits the disclosure of non-public financial projections to any external party, including investors, and suggest they await the official release of information through the appropriate channels. Option B. Agree to provide the projections, but only after consulting with the investor's personal financial advisor to ensure they understand the sensitive nature of the information. Option C. Provide the investor with the requested preliminary financial projections, explaining that this is a special exception due to their significant investment and the urgency of their request. Option D. Share the projections with the investor, but add a disclaimer stating that the information is preliminary and subject to change, and that Harmony Gold is not liable for any investment decisions made based on it. The correct answer is A. Inform the investor that Harmony Gold's policy strictly prohibits the disclosure of non-public financial projections to any external party, including investors, and suggest they await the official release of information through the appropriate channels. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Harmony Gold due to the potential conflict between a stakeholder's request and the company's internal policies and regulatory obligations. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing stakeholder relationships with the imperative to uphold compliance and ethical standards. The correct approach involves a measured response that acknowledges the stakeholder's request, while clearly articulating the limitations imposed by Harmony Gold's internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. This approach is professionally sound because it demonstrates transparency, maintains ethical conduct, and ensures adherence to established compliance procedures. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the regulatory expectation that companies operate with integrity and within legal boundaries. By seeking internal guidance and adhering to established protocols, the employee protects both themselves and Harmony Gold from potential compliance breaches and reputational damage. An incorrect approach of immediately agreeing to the stakeholder's request without proper review would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could lead to non-compliance with internal policies designed to prevent conflicts of interest or ensure fair dealing, and potentially violate external regulations governing financial advice or disclosure. Another incorrect approach, that of outright refusal without explanation or offering alternative compliance solutions, could damage the stakeholder relationship and miss an opportunity to educate the stakeholder on Harmony Gold's operational constraints and compliance requirements. Finally, attempting to bypass established internal procedures to accommodate the request, even with good intentions, would represent a failure to uphold the company's governance framework and could expose Harmony Gold to undue risk. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the request, assessing it against internal policies and external regulations, consulting with appropriate internal departments, e.g., compliance, legal, and communicating a clear, reasoned, and compliant response to the stakeholder. This process ensures that decisions are not only effective in managing relationships, but also robust in their adherence to ethical and legal standards. Question 15. The audit findings indicate that a junior analyst at Harmony Gold has inadvertently discovered discrepancies in a significant upcoming project's financial projections that, if accurate, could materially impact the company's share price. The analyst is unsure of the exact implications or the official reporting protocol for such sensitive information. Option A. Discuss the findings with a trusted senior colleague in a different department to get their opinion on the significance of the discrepancies before taking any action. Option B. Document the findings internally and await further instructions from management regarding the project's financial status. Option C. Escalate the findings and potential implications directly to the Harmony Gold compliance officer and the legal department, as per the company's internal whistleblowing and disclosure policy. Option D. Immediately report the discrepancies and potential implications to the head of investor relations and the chief financial officer, providing a detailed analysis of the potential impact. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the discrepancies and potential implications to the head of investor relations and the chief financial officer, providing a detailed analysis of the potential impact. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential breach of Harmony Gold's internal policies and relevant financial regulations concerning the disclosure of material non-public information. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the employee to balance their immediate reporting obligations with the potential for misinterpretation or overreaction by senior management, while strictly adhering to Harmony Gold's established compliance framework and the principles of market integrity. The employee must exercise sound judgment to determine the appropriate course of action that safeguards both the company's reputation and regulatory standing. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the matter to the designated compliance officer or legal department, as per Harmony Gold's internal whistleblowing and disclosure policies. This ensures that the information is handled by individuals trained to assess its materiality and to execute the necessary disclosure procedures in accordance with applicable regulations, such as those governing insider trading and market abuse. This proactive and structured escalation demonstrates a commitment to transparency, regulatory compliance, and the prevention of any potential market manipulation or unfair advantage. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to independently assess the materiality of the information and decide whether or not to disclose it without consulting the compliance department. This bypasses established internal controls and regulatory mandates, risking an incorrect assessment of materiality and a failure to comply with disclosure obligations. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the information with colleagues outside of the designated compliance channels. This could lead to unauthorized dissemination of material non-public information, creating a risk of insider trading and undermining the integrity of the market. Finally, ignoring the information or delaying reporting it to the appropriate authorities would be a severe ethical and regulatory failure, potentially exposing Harmony Gold to significant penalties and reputational damage. Professionals in similar situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to company policy and regulatory requirements. This involves understanding the company's internal reporting lines for compliance issues, recognizing the definition of material non-public information, and knowing the relevant regulatory obligations. When in doubt, the principle of erring on the side of caution and escalating for expert review is paramount. This ensures that all actions are defensible and aligned with the highest standards of corporate governance and ethical conduct. Question 16. The assessment process reveals that you have a close personal friendship with a senior manager within Harmony Gold who is part of the hiring panel for the position you are applying for. This manager has not initiated contact regarding your application, and you have not discussed your application with them. However, you are aware of their involvement. Which of the following is the most professionally responsible and ethically sound approach to take? Option A. Do not disclose the relationship, assuming it will not influence the hiring decision and that the senior manager will act impartially. Option B. Inform the senior manager directly about your application and ask them to advocate for you to ensure a fair review. Option C. Wait to see if the senior manager mentions your application to you, and if they do, then consider disclosing the relationship. Option D. Proactively inform Harmony Gold's Human Resources Department about your friendship with the senior manager and request guidance on how to proceed with the hiring process. The correct answer is D. Proactively inform Harmony Gold's Human Resources Department about your friendship with the senior manager and request guidance on how to proceed with the hiring process. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a candidate applying to Harmony Gold, requiring them to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ethical considerations within the mining industry. The challenge lies in balancing personal relationships with professional integrity and adherence to Harmony Gold's stated policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any perceived or actual conflicts do not compromise the fairness and transparency of the hiring process or violate ethical standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively disclosing the relationship to Harmony Gold's HR department and seeking guidance on how to proceed. This demonstrates transparency, integrity, and a commitment to ethical conduct. By informing the relevant parties, the candidate allows Harmony Gold to implement appropriate measures, such as recusal from the decision-making process or reassignment of responsibilities, thereby mitigating any potential conflict of interest and upholding the integrity of the hiring process. This aligns with general ethical principles of disclosure and conflict avoidance and would be expected under most corporate codes of conduct and employment regulations designed to ensure fair hiring practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that involves not disclosing the relationship and hoping it goes unnoticed is ethically unsound and professionally negligent. It creates a hidden conflict of interest that could later lead to accusations of favoritism or bias, damaging both the candidate's reputation and Harmony Gold's hiring process. This failure to disclose violates fundamental ethical obligations and could contravene employment laws related to fair hiring and the prevention of conflicts of interest. Another incorrect approach is to assume the relationship is insignificant and therefore does not warrant disclosure. This underestimates the importance of perceived fairness and the potential for even minor relationships to influence decision-making, intentionally or unintentionally. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of professional ethics and the importance of maintaining an unimpeachable hiring process, potentially violating internal Harmony Gold policies and broader ethical guidelines. Finally, an approach that involves only disclosing the relationship if directly asked, without proactive communication, is also problematic. While disclosure is eventually made, the delay and lack of initiative suggest a reluctance to be fully transparent, potentially implying an attempt to gain an advantage or avoid scrutiny. This passive approach fails to meet the standard of proactive ethical conduct expected in professional settings. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing potential conflicts of interest should adopt a proactive and transparent approach. The decision-making framework involves 1. Identifying potential conflicts, e.g., personal relationships with individuals involved in the hiring process. 2. Assessing the nature and severity of the conflict. 3. Consulting relevant policies and regulations, e.g., Harmony Gold's Code of Conduct, Employment Law. 4. Proactively disclosing the conflict to the appropriate authority, e.g., HR hiring manager. 5. Following the guidance provided to mitigate or manage the conflict. This ensures integrity, fairness, and compliance. Question 17. The audit findings indicate that Harmony Gold's internal controls regarding the reporting of certain material transactions may not fully align with the disclosure requirements stipulated by the relevant financial regulatory framework. A senior manager, concerned about the potential negative impact on investor confidence and ongoing negotiations with a key partner, is considering whether to immediately disclose these findings or to address them internally first before any formal reporting. Option A. Inform the audit team that only the positive aspects of the audit should be included in the final report to maintain a favorable perception of Harmony Gold's operations. Option B. Attempt to persuade the audit team to revise the findings to be less critical, suggesting that the current interpretation of the control deficiencies is overly stringent. Option C. Immediately report the audit findings to the relevant internal compliance department, and if necessary, to the appropriate regulatory bodies as per Harmony Gold's disclosure policies and regulatory obligations. Option D. Delay formal reporting of the audit findings to allow the internal team to rectify the control deficiencies, and then report the corrected situation to avoid immediate negative market reaction. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the audit findings to the relevant internal compliance department, and, if necessary, to the appropriate regulatory bodies as per Harmony Gold's disclosure policies and regulatory obligations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Harmony Gold employees due to the inherent conflict between maintaining client relationships and adhering to strict regulatory disclosure requirements. The pressure to retain business can lead to a temptation to downplay or omit unfavorable audit findings, which directly contravenes the principles of transparency and integrity mandated by regulatory frameworks. Careful judgment is required to prioritize compliance and ethical conduct over short-term commercial pressures. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves promptly and accurately reporting the audit findings to the relevant internal stakeholders and regulatory bodies, as required by Harmony Gold's internal policies and applicable regulations. This upholds the principle of transparency, ensuring that all parties are aware of potential risks or non-compliance issues. Regulatory frameworks typically mandate timely and accurate disclosure of material information to prevent market manipulation and protect investors. By adhering to this, Harmony Gold demonstrates its commitment to good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, fostering trust with stakeholders and regulators. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves delaying the reporting of findings to allow for internal remediation without formal disclosure. This failure breaches regulatory requirements for timely reporting of material information. It can be interpreted as an attempt to conceal non-compliance, which undermines market integrity and investor confidence. Another incorrect approach is to selectively report only the positive aspects of the audit, omitting the findings related to potential breaches. This constitutes a misrepresentation of facts, violating ethical obligations, and potentially leading to severe regulatory penalties for Harmony Gold and individuals involved. Such an action erodes trust and can have significant legal and reputational consequences. A third incorrect approach is to seek to influence the audit team to alter the findings to be less critical. This is a direct attempt to obstruct the audit process and manipulate reporting, which is a serious ethical and regulatory violation. It compromises the independence and objectivity of the audit function, which is crucial for maintaining financial market integrity. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situation should first consult Harmony Gold's internal compliance policies and relevant regulatory guidelines. The decision-making process should prioritize adherence to these rules, even if it presents short-term commercial difficulties. Escalating the issue to the compliance department or legal counsel is a critical step to ensure proper guidance and documentation of the decision-making process. Maintaining a clear audit trail of all communications and decisions is essential for demonstrating due diligence and ethical conduct. Question 18. Investigation of a Harmony Gold geologist who is privy to preliminary, unconfirmed findings indicating a significant new gold deposit discovery, is considering whether to purchase additional Harmony Gold shares before the official announcement. The geologist has not yet formally reported these findings internally. What is the most appropriate course of action for the geologist? Option A. Immediately report the preliminary findings to Harmony Gold's compliance department and refrain from any personal trading in Harmony Gold shares until the information is publicly disclosed. Option B. Purchase more Harmony Gold shares, anticipating a significant price increase upon the announcement of the discovery. Option C. Continue with personal investment plans without disclosing the preliminary findings, assuming the information is not yet material enough to affect the share price. Option D. Inform a close friend about the potential discovery, suggesting they consider investing in Harmony Gold. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the preliminary findings to Harmony Gold's compliance department and refrain from any personal trading in Harmony Gold shares until the information is publicly disclosed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Harmony Gold due to the potential conflict between personal financial interests and their fiduciary duty to the company. The employee has access to material, non-public information that could significantly impact Harmony Gold's share price. Acting on this information before it is publicly disclosed would constitute insider trading, a serious regulatory and ethical breach. The challenge lies in navigating this situation ethically and legally, prioritizing Harmony Gold's interests and regulatory compliance above personal gain. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to Harmony Gold's compliance department or legal counsel and refraining from any trading activity related to Harmony Gold shares until the information is public. This upholds the employee's duty of loyalty and confidentiality to Harmony Gold. It aligns with the principles of fair markets and regulatory frameworks that prohibit insider trading, ensuring that all investors have access to the same information simultaneously. This proactive disclosure and abstention demonstrate integrity and adherence to Harmony Gold's internal policies and relevant securities laws. Incorrect approaches analysis. Acting on the information to buy Harmony Gold shares before the announcement would be a direct violation of insider trading regulations. This is because it exploits privileged information for personal profit, creating an unfair advantage over other market participants and undermining market integrity. It also breaches the employee's fiduciary duty to Harmony Gold, which requires them to act in the company's best interest and maintain confidentiality. Sharing the information with a friend or family member to encourage them to trade Harmony Gold shares would also constitute insider trading, specifically tipping. This is illegal and unethical as it extends the unfair advantage to others, broadening the scope of the regulatory breach and potentially implicating multiple parties. The employee would be liable for facilitating illegal trading, ignoring the information and continuing with personal investment plans without considering its impact on Harmony Gold or disclosing it to the company is also an unacceptable approach. While not actively trading on the information, failing to acknowledge and manage the potential conflict of interest demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and awareness of regulatory obligations. It leaves the employee vulnerable to accusations of negligence or complicity if the situation is later scrutinized. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the financial services industry, particularly those working for publicly listed companies like Harmony Gold, must operate with the highest ethical standards and a thorough understanding of regulatory requirements. When faced with a situation involving potential insider information, the decision-making process should involve 1. Immediate recognition of the sensitive nature of the information and the potential conflict of interest. 2. Prioritization of legal and ethical obligations over personal gain. 3. Proactive and transparent communication with the appropriate internal departments, compliance, legal. 4. Strict adherence to company policies and relevant securities laws regarding trading and information disclosure. 5. Abstaining from any action that could be construed as insider trading or tipping. Question 19. The audit findings indicate a discrepancy in the recording of certain operational expenses at Harmony Gold's South African operations. Your direct manager instructs you to adjust the expense recognition to align with a previously agreed upon, but undocumented, internal target, suggesting this will expedite the quarterly reporting cycle. You are aware that this adjustment may not fully comply with Harmony Gold's established accounting policies and internal control procedures. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with the expense adjustment as instructed by your manager to meet the reporting deadline. Option B. Discuss the discrepancy informally with your manager to understand their rationale further before taking any action. Option C. Seek clarification from the Harmony Gold Compliance Department or legal counsel regarding the appropriate accounting treatment and internal policy adherence. Option D. Refuse to make the adjustment and inform your manager that you cannot comply with the request. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the expense adjustment as instructed by your manager to meet the reporting deadline. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual at Harmony Gold to navigate a conflict between a direct instruction from a senior manager and a potential breach of internal policy and ethical conduct. The pressure to comply with a superior's request, especially when it appears to offer a shortcut or immediate benefit, can be significant. However, upholding the integrity of financial reporting and adhering to established internal controls are paramount responsibilities. Careful judgment is required to assess the implications of the manager's request against Harmony Gold's established policies and ethical standards, ensuring that short-term expediency does not compromise long-term compliance and reputation. The correct approach involves escalating the concern through the appropriate channels within Harmony Gold, rather than directly complying with the manager's request or ignoring the issue. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and adherence to internal governance. By seeking guidance from the compliance department or legal counsel, the individual ensures that the situation is reviewed by those with the expertise to interpret relevant policies and regulations. This proactive step protects both the individual and Harmony Gold from potential regulatory sanctions and reputational damage. It aligns with the principles of good corporate governance, which emphasize transparency, accountability, and the importance of robust internal controls. An incorrect approach would be to directly implement the manager's instruction without further inquiry. This would constitute a failure to adhere to Harmony Gold's internal policies regarding financial reporting and potentially lead to misstated financial information, which is a serious regulatory and ethical breach. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the manager's request and take no action. This passive stance fails to address a potentially problematic situation and could be interpreted as a dereliction of duty, leaving Harmony Gold exposed to risks. Finally, attempting to resolve the issue solely through informal discussions with the manager, without involving the designated compliance or legal functions, bypasses established procedures and may not adequately address the underlying compliance concerns. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, they should clearly identify the potential conflict between a directive and established policies or ethical principles. Second, they should consult relevant internal policies, codes of conduct, and any applicable regulatory guidelines. Third, if uncertainty or a conflict persists, they should escalate the matter through the designated reporting lines, such as to their direct supervisor, if appropriate and not the source of the conflict, the compliance department, internal audit, or legal counsel. This ensures that the issue is addressed by individuals with the authority and expertise to make informed decisions and take appropriate action, thereby safeguarding both personal integrity and organizational compliance. Question 20. The audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest involving a senior manager in Harmony Gold's procurement department who has been observed to consistently favor a specific supplier for significant contracts, despite other suppliers offering comparable or better terms. The manager's spouse is a shareholder in this favored supplier. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for Harmony Gold's compliance officer? Option A. Initiate a confidential, independent investigation into the alleged conflict of interest, gathering all relevant documentation and interviewing key personnel, while temporarily reassigning the senior manager to a non-procurement role pending the investigation's outcome. Option B. Advise the senior manager to disclose their spouse's shareholding to the board and request that they recuse themselves from all future decisions involving that supplier. Option C. Discuss the findings informally with the senior manager to understand their perspective before any formal action is taken. Option D. Immediately terminate the contract with the favored supplier to remove the perceived conflict and issue a formal warning to the senior manager. The correct answer is A. Initiate a confidential, independent investigation into the alleged conflict of interest, gathering all relevant documentation and interviewing key personnel, while temporarily reassigning the senior manager to a non-procurement role pending the investigation's outcome. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest within Harmony Gold's procurement department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate and decisive action to uphold ethical standards and regulatory compliance while minimizing disruption to operations. The pressure to maintain business relationships must be balanced against the imperative to prevent unethical practices and potential financial impropriety. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate business interactions and actions that could compromise the integrity of Harmony Gold's procurement processes. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective investigation into the reported findings, adhering strictly to Harmony Gold's internal code of conduct and relevant South African mining and financial regulations. This means gathering all pertinent facts, interviewing relevant parties discreetly, and documenting the process meticulously. The investigation should be conducted by an independent party, such as the Internal Audit Department or external legal counsel, to ensure impartiality. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the potential misconduct, upholds the principles of good corporate governance, and ensures compliance with regulatory frameworks designed to prevent fraud and corruption in the mining sector. It prioritizes transparency and accountability, which are fundamental ethical and legal requirements. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the findings without a proper investigation, perhaps due to the perceived importance of the supplier relationship. This failure to investigate would violate Harmony Gold's ethical obligations and potentially contravene South African laws related to corporate governance and financial misconduct. It creates an environment where unethical behavior can flourish, exposing the company to significant reputational damage and legal penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the individuals involved without a structured investigation. This could lead to premature accusations, destruction of evidence, or an inability to gather accurate information, thereby compromising the integrity of any subsequent investigation and potentially leading to unfair disciplinary actions or a failure to identify the full extent of any wrongdoing. This approach lacks the due diligence required by ethical standards and regulatory oversight. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately terminate the supplier relationship without establishing a clear breach of contract or ethical guidelines. While decisive action might seem appropriate, doing so without due process could expose Harmony Gold to legal challenges from the supplier and would not address the root cause of the potential conflict of interest within its own staff. It bypasses the necessary steps to ensure fairness and accuracy. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to the company's code of conduct, relevant legislation, such as the Companies Act of South Africa and any specific mining sector regulations, and established ethical principles. This framework involves 1. Recognizing and reporting potential issues promptly. 2. Initiating a fair and impartial investigation. 3. Documenting all findings and actions. 4. Taking appropriate remedial action based on the investigation's outcome. 5. Ensuring continuous improvement of internal controls to prevent recurrence.